Welcome to A Slice of Therapy. This podcast was created with Anchor. And if you've not heard of Anchor, let me explain. It's free. It's a really easy way to make a podcast. And it helps me because I can just do this every day directly into my phone, because there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. So if you fancy making a podcast too, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Today I'm going to share something very practical with you, which is going to be useful to you if you're overwhelmed with stuff to do. If you've got a task list as long as your arm and you look at it and it overwhelms you. And I've been in this place myself. I remember about 10 years ago now, I was involved in a project and I was leading on the project. And at any one time, my list of things to do went over 3 full-page A4 lined paper, 3 pages of that. And it felt horrible. And if you're in this situation yourself, you'll know what I mean by that. It felt really horrible because in every moment of the day, I was picking up this list of 3, sometimes 4 pages and deciding, what am I going to do next? And every time I picked up that enormous list of stuff to do, I just felt awful and overwhelmed. And it was no fun at all. So what I want to do in this episode is help you out if you're in a certain situation that's like that. And I'm going to give you a few steps to have a go at in order to change your experience of working with your to-do list, so that it's no longer overwhelming, but it's actually very, very manageable and feels good. So there's basically just a few steps to this. So the very first step is that big long list of stuff to do that feels overwhelming to you. The first step is to filter it, to actually evaluate whether everything on that list actually needs to be there. So in the first instance, you can go through all the stuff on the list of things to do and ask yourself the question: is this really contributing much to my goals? Now, you'll remember from other podcasts that there is such a thing called the Pareto principle, which means that the vast majority of our outcomes, good and bad, tend to be caused by just a small number of the inputs. And so in just the same way, there's going to be a small minority of those tasks in your to-do list which are going to be responsible for the vast majority of your outcomes. And so your first job really is to sift through and think, is this really contributing to my outcome here? Or could I actually get rid of it with minimal impact? Because the best thing to do with any item on a to-do list is decide that you don't actually need to do it and get rid of it. So if it's possible for you to get rid of it, then that would be the first stage of the filter. The second stage of the filter is to check whether there's anything there that can be automated. So I'm sure that there's certain bills, for instance, that you pay by direct debit rather than have to remember each and every month to pay that bill. And it's a lot easier, isn't it? Because you've automated it. It's not taking up headspace anymore. You're not having to remember. You're not having to actually go through the process of paying the bill. It just happens. You've set it up by direct debit and it's automatic. So is there anything on your to-do list that might fall on the automatic list, that you can just automate it and then you never have to do it again because there's some sort of automatic way to do that, just like a direct debit? The third filter is to ask whether the projects which are producing all these items on the to-do list could be reimagined. So, for instance, what I noticed was that sometimes on my projects, my to-do list was a lot bigger because I'd decided to be really quite perfectionist about the project I was working on. But if I ask myself the question, what would this project look like if it was easy rather than perfect? Then I was able to get rid of a whole host of tasks, which were really not adding much to the whole outcome. I could actually do it a little bit dirtier, maybe a little bit rough around the edges, but would still get the same thing done without the perfectionism and where it felt easier for me. And so that's a good filter as well. If I were to reimagine the project or the things that I'm working on so that they were easy for me rather than perfectionist, what could I get rid of there? So that's the first stage, really. You go through a very quick filter just to make sure that there's things on your list that really need to be on there and get rid of anything that doesn't. But even after that, you're probably left with a pretty long list. So what do you do with that pretty long list? Well, like I say, what we would normally do is we would work from that long list. That long list becomes your working list. That's the thing you have in front of you as you're getting through your day. And you'll do a task and then you'll pick something else from that list. The problem with having this big long list as your working list, your day-to-day, moment-by-moment list that you're referring to, first of all, it's really overwhelming. It really puts a knot in the stomach. It's no fun. And secondly, it actually slows you down. And the reason that it slows you down is because you're having to read through this list every time simply to process it, simply to make the decision of what it is you're going to do next. And so when you're working from this long list, you get slowed down, you get demotivated, you get stressed, you get overwhelmed. And it's very easy then just to walk away and feel agitated and not have a nice time. So what I did and what I'm going to invite you to think about doing is not to have that long list as your working list. Now, as I said, mine went over about 3 to 4 A4 pages, lined pages as well. So you can imagine what I must have looked like, sat there in front of my computer with these 4 pieces of paper, all filled with writing and stuff to do around me. It was a nightmare. So I stopped doing that. And instead what I did was I only looked at that long list once a day. At the end of the day, in fact. And at the end of the day, I would look at it in order to plan tomorrow. And when I looked at it to plan tomorrow, what I would do tomorrow is I would create my short working list. So I would sit there and just go through this once a day and decide which are, say, the 3 or 4 tasks, key tasks that I'm going to get done tomorrow. Now, I say 3 to 4 tasks. You might want to do more. You might want to do less. That's fine. Bear in mind, though, that life still happens. All the kind of spontaneous stuff, the thing that you can't plan for, they'll still happen. And so something that looks like you're not doing much, when you throw the rest of life in, is actually quite a bit. But experiment with that. You'll find your sweet spot. For me, it was about 3 or 4 things per day. For other people, it's less. For others, it's more. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, you just pick, well, tomorrow, which are the 3 or 4 things that I'm going to accomplish? And you write them down onto a short list on a separate piece of paper. And then you put your long list away, never to be looked at again until the end of play tomorrow. And so what you're doing there is you're transferring this overwhelming thing, putting that on the back burner, and you're only ever working from a working list of 3 to 4 things. Now, the benefit of that is that you don't feel overwhelmed. The benefit of that is it's very fast to process, so you can simply pick it through. And the other benefit of that is that a long list never, ever gets done, does it? Because there's always things being added to the long list, but the long list never gets done. And there's something kind of like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill forever and ever, like that old fable, where you're never getting that little dopamine rush of having completed everything. When you've got a short list of 3 to 4 things to do that day, it feels great, when it's done. And it feels really motivating. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel as though you've done something and conquered something and you're ready again for the next day. And it's all accomplished by that end of day planning where you can get your long list out of your drawer and then create a short list of 3 or 4 things or whatever number it is that you want for tomorrow. And then you put it back in the drawer again. So you're only ever working from that short list of 3 to 4 actions that you're going to do. The only time that you will ever touch your long list is at the end of the day, or if you notice that a new task emerges, you would briefly get it out and write it at the end of the long list and put it straight back again. But in each moment as you're working through your day, you're only ever working from that short list. And it makes the world of difference. The overwhelm stops, the knot in the stomach stops. You get that sense of achievement because you've done all your tasks that day. And so you get that little hit of dopamine that feels good to us. And it's a completely different experience. And so a very practical one today, but one I think that will have an impact if you're able to try it out. So first of all, go through your long list and filter it according to those stages. Does it really need to be there? Can you automate it? What would your project look like if it was easy rather than perfectionist? Does that get rid of some on the to-do list? Secondly, put your long list away so you're never having to look at it moment to moment, only at the end of the day in order to plan for tomorrow. And when you plan for tomorrow, create a very short list of, say, 3 to 4 items, or whatever number is your sweet spot, and only ever work from that. And I think what you'll find is that you'll be making headway and feeling good and feeling successful just through this very, very simple and very practical change. So if you find this useful, please share it around so other people who are feeling overwhelmed with stuff to do can find some use from it as well. If you'd like to work with me directly, I'm Alun Parry. Find out more at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And of course, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And you also, if you'd like to, give us a 5-star rating over at Stitcher or on Apple Podcasts. So thanks for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow with another one.